U.S. President Donald Trump started World War II. Trading. But as you know, very often trade wars are prologue to real condensal conflicts, and just the same along with this, the situation around Iran is heating up. The French foreign minister announced that Trump not joking. And the war of the United States of Iran, she is right on the threshold we are. And of course, Putin's special envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, went to Washington in order to agree on something with Americans about this, and not just in our today's issue of in the first part, we will have a detailed analysis of trading, Trump wars, and how it will affect the situation directly, including in Russia, how already plans to respond China, European Union, and why Trump did not bypass. With such attention, not deprived including allies, because duties are introduced against European Union 20%, against South Korea, against Japan, against the UK, about all this in the first part. You and I will also discuss the situation in the Middle East, not only about Iran we will talk, including Syria we will worry, because there Israel struck on Syrian facilities, which in fact could become Turkish, that is, it is a privative blow to Erdogan. Well, you and I begin. Trump called this day a day. Liberation of America. All attention is focused, of course, now to the issue of trade wars. This is the end of free trade, which defined for decades world commerce. What exactly did Trump do? By the way, about the World War, I'm not here exaggerated. Here, for example, cover New York post-World Trade War. See duties. Specifically, if you want to sell goods in the United States, your goods will be taxed a certain percentage. This percentage varies. For example, the European Union is 20% duty to Vietnam, they're 46%. India, they're 26%. Can we see there? Even Switzerland, they're 31%. Duties introduced, that's simple to all countries of the world. Now someone will say, what about Russia? And by the way, here on Russia not introduced. The fact is that we have trade with the Americans so much low in performance that the Americans decided not to introduce. Either we will have a base rate, which Trump decided to apply as 10%. Let's watch the video first. These detailed signs have already been published. Where can you see which country? What duty will be taxed from funny even islands, such as islands, for example, McDonald's near Australia, where no one except penguins lives? Trump imposed 10% duties. Well, let's first see a fragment with Trump performances. How he imagined it all, that certainly was in the wrapper of the show. The most real show. So if you look at China, first row, China 67%. These are the tariffs they charge in the United States, including currency manipulation and the trade barrier, so 67%. I think that in most cases you can see it. Who has good eyes with bad eyes will not see. We did not want to take a lot of charts because the wind part we came with a smaller chart, thus 67. Interest, so we will charge mutual tariff tax with a discount of 34%. I think they take money from us. We take even less from them. Also, someone can be worthy, yes they will, because we never took anything from anyone, but now we're going to charge from the European Union. They are very hard. They are very hard traders. No, you think in the European Union, what he's so friendly, but they rip us off. This is so sad to say. This is so pathetic. 39%. They take from us. We will take 20% from them. Half Vietnam are great negotiators. Lovely people, they like me. I like them. The problem is, what do they charge us? 90%. We will borrow from them. They're 46. Taiwan. Where do they produce the chips? They took all our computer chips. Semiconductors. We used to be king. We were everything, we had everything. But 64% we gonna blast. 32. Japan 46%. They were squeezing. We are 46 and even more for some goods, such as cars. But you get it, we take from them 24. That is, Trump represents it all as alignment. But when economists began to disassemble, are these tariffs really is on American goods who mess around in these countries? What Trump is talking about then came to the conclusion that formula is very weird, and in fact, there are no such tariffs. So what formula did Trump calculate? What, for example, is Japan there? American goods are taxed with 46% duty. It is not clear, but does it matter to anyone? Now it is important that Trump introduces specific tariffs. And of course, the hysteria is already beginning all over the world. How does it even work? Trade war. Here, let's deal with it with you. What are the advantages for the United States? That is, why he taxes vulgar foreign goods. He stated that if you want to have 0% duty, then transfer your productions to the United States of America. Thus, you will create American economies, jobs, pay taxes. American economy again, thus let's say so cheer her up a little, yes. And it turns out on the one hand, pros for a new such industrialization of America. This is if everyone runs production move to the user, but already built logistics chains. So somewhere the goods are purchased, they are delivered to the factory according to a certain scheme, which stands there in Vietnam or in China, or for example a Japanese factory, and entrepreneur, big business needs, in that case not enough to invest in construction. Enterprises in the United States also review all logistics chains. Further this, reducing the trade deficit, that is, in the United States they import much more from China. What do they sell in China? Why was I in the beginning of graduation talking? There are some very interesting historical examples. For example, the Opium War. Cause of the Opium War. It was a trade deficit between China and Britain, that is, the Chinese sold a lot in Britain goods, and the British could not offer China anything except drugs. China closed its market to British goods. This is the same protectionism, which is Trump going to play now, by logic. Yes, all countries should unite and want to pile up. Trump pile up Americans to open their market. So as if everyone is going through, because if you look here are quotes. There is a French economist, a Frédéric Bastiat there, who said that if goods do not cross borders, then soldiers will do it. Well, and here's the opera war. Such a best example here, I think. China closed the market. British soldiers came and crossed the border instead of British their goods. Well, only goods, of course. They had such a dye-specific opium. Bismarck wants to prevent war, develop trade. A Churchill, when free trade disappears the guns begin. Well, that is a huge number of quotes who either pronounced some leaders. Either these quotes they're attributed to them. Well, you know, with quotes it's always difficult here. It's only now convenient when there is a video and the one who said this phrase can be verified very easily and quickly. Well, really, economists say. What trade wars can lead to real conflicts now about cons? That is, it seems it's all cool. Trump is just some genius. Yes, here is his sign. Just some know-how. Why did no one before Trump do that? And there's an answer to that too, because there's the most obvious downside. Increased prices for the end user, because the maker going with compensate duty and shift this piston to the consumer. That is, if Trump introduced a piston on Japanese cars, they're at 25%, or on German cars at 25%. It means what German car in use that imitates these 25%, because the business does not want to cut its profits. They'll just go by the price increase option. This will lead, that is, this is the first consequences. And the second consequence, it will lead to retaliatory tariffs. Though Trump makes an appearance that these tariffs are already in effect on American goods. That is, he presents something that actually on our goods, and so there are tariffs. And we're only trying to even half as much enter on European, their Japanese, Taiwanese, their South Korean goods. Most likely it's not. For example, the European Union has already announced that what is developing countermeasures to U.S. duties. Well, and of course it is. Risks for the financial market, for investment, for the stock market. Therefore, there is already information that, well, when we'll open trades in the United States, then we will see with you a serious fall there of all companies. So profitable or unprofitable trade war. Here the question is what Trump is seeking. If he wants to achieve their new industrialization of America, then in the long run there is a chance. What will it give the result? In the short term, it will lead to the discontent of the population there due to rising prices. Plus, here trade wars are always a big risk. One of the reasons there about the Great Depression in the United States are considered just the same duties, which Americans traded, and here Trump he plays with fire. Therefore, most likely, what that Trump is seeking just concessions from all other countries. What is the convenience? Since Trump really led them one day, and one day can cancel, what was he already doing on such trades with Mexico, or for example with Canada? That is, he immediately pulled up the stakes very hard. Once again, the fact that he did it well, kind of a sensation. Yes, such duty to all countries of the world practically, and also on allies. It is very important for us to demonstrate. Well, let's just say the collective West isn't the same anymore, and levied against the European Union, and against traditional US allies in Asia, or for example Taiwan, which taxes with duties. He wasn't even helped by investing in the American economy, because they are there somewhere under $100 billion, promised to invest. Trump still dubies it all taxes. Well, South Korea, Japan is traditional allies against whale which are used. They also fall under vulgar, what can lead unexpected reformatting of military alliances in the world, because if you're such a traditional trading partner turns away from you, you can think, and who else can have business with? So, well, after all, I'm inclined to that still based on the statements, for example, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, who stated that take a deep breath. Lean back in your chair, take your time. He asked no one to take their time. The history of trade is that we are a deficit country, and a deficit country has an advantage. You are countries with surpluses. Traditionally surplus countries will lose in any trade escalation. What is he talking about? Well, that is, as I explained by the example of a whale. That is, China sells a lot of goods in the United States. The United States, on the contrary, sells much less goods to China, it turns out. The United States is a country with a trade deficit with China, and China is the opposite with a surplus, and that means he will suffer more from Putin, because if we sum up, yes, how much does China get from trade? Throw in their duty there at 20+%, and get the result. So now about, well, let's just say the consequences for the whole world. But the obvious consequence, it's just an increase in the prices of goods. This is probably the easiest what can basically happen, but I still lean towards the fact that this for that to knock yourself a good deal with every country, so she's gonna make concessions. And I guess that the calls will start some traps, and we will see in the near future what some countries agreed and Trump will announce to go out. What so here is there from South Korea? Duties will now decrease. They will be there not 20%, and they will be 10%. Well, and so with every country who will make concessions to Trump. Incredible. It's nice to watch the Euro of bureaucrats rooting Ursula von der Leyen. She had to make an emergency appeal. Uncertainty will increase and provoke the growth of further projectionism. The consequences will be terrible for millions of people around the world. The world and the most vulnerable countries who are now exposed to one of the highest duty from the United States. According to her, tariffs will hit consumers around the world. That is what I was talking about, but obviously possible price increase. And also the US business will become less profitable. We are ready to answer, stated at Ursula von der Leyen. We are already completing the first package of countermeasures, and now we are preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests. I know that many of you feel cheated. Our oldest ally, but only for the sake of this Trump who needed to win the election for Eurocrats to declare that they are deceived by their oldest ally. Well, how nice you are now, yes. Feel on yourself. What is this? Generally, there is another such interesting point of view. It is already from the category of not only economic consequences and geopolitical. What thus? Hegemon when he understands. Americans were the hegemon, that they are losing their hegemony, that is such overwhelming advantage over all other countries. That is the United States already now. Well, let's just say the power is 1 out of 100. Naturally, they're world leaders in all respects. But there is no such overwhelming advantage. So that's what hegemon is. He's coming. Apply this tactic of creating a world house. That is to unleash as many trade wars as possible. Conventional wars. And here, like that bombing of Iran. Yes, pops up, we have a conflict with China can flash at any moment. And in such a house, try to be a hegemon again, destabilize the system so much. To those who challenged the hegemon, for example China, in the conditions of this house showed themselves worse. And Americans, well, let's say so, like Phoenix. May they be reborn again as a hegemon. That is, this point of view also takes place. Well, the First World War. Global house. States out winner. The Second World War. Global house. States out winner. The American economy has experienced a surge every time after world wars. So here, unfortunately, we also have to take this into account with you. Well, and once again, Iran theme. We will be with you today. Discuss, she suggests, strengthening such a world house. So, well. Turning to the topic of Iran. Our next block, war with Iran, is almost inevitable. This was stated by the French foreign minister. That is now, it is not a statement in the press, not Dmitry Nikotin's statement about that the likelihood of war increases. I talked about this back in the 24th year. This is already an official statement. What else was said? In case of failure of negotiations on the nuclear deal, military confrontation seems to be almost inevitable. Our goal is to reach an agreement which lends itself and permanently limit Iran's nuclear program. Also, he stressed, Medical France head, that one should never get nuclear weapons in the same, and earlier, the position of the elite is as tough as possible in relation to the United States. They rejected first direct negotiations. But there is still the possibility of direct negotiations. And I will remind you that Trump, he put forward an ultimatum and a wound. That is, stop developing nuclear weapons, giving you 2 months. If this does not happen, we will start bombing you. That is, about the ground operation of speech. I think be and can't, but provide bombing, along with Israel's Iranian nuclear facilities, not just the United States. Abel, I will remind what shy. It's the only power in the world with that much aircraft carriers, that is, they can just fit their entire fleet to the Persian Gulf and start ironing Iran and the Iranian pawn, but they won't handle. Are now about as if presses and plums of some Delhi Express, and Rank will face his defeat by September if he doesn't agree to the nuclear deal and will not begin dismantling the nuclear program. What else is interesting? That's what proves American hegemony is no longer the same. Also appeared in the publication of MiddleEast, which is dedicated to the Middle East, about that Saudi Arabia, intoxicated Arab Emirates, Qatar and Kuwait informed Washington that they will not grant their territory for screen bombings. This is also a serious sign that will complicate the operation, but will not cancel it. That is, for example, Americans can use. And Israel as a springboard. Israel would totally agree with this. So how is Syria no longer represents any protection for Iran that used to be Syrian was? After terrorist al-Jilani came to power, Israel began quietly ironing Syrian facilities. Verve destroys Syrian airfields. We will talk about it too now with you. Thus immediately goes Iraq. Further, if we open the map, before this Israel cleansed Lebanon, that is, everything will be calm. It turns out through Syria fly Israeli fighters and American flying into Cancer territory. There are American military bases in Iraq, and then begin to launch missiles on the territory of Iran. Iran same threatens. Yes, strikes on Iraqi. Yes, military bases in Iraq. Agree, states this is the same floating aircraft carrier due to its geographical location, that is a whole continent, practically under U.S. control. No one poses a threat to him there, neither Canada nor Mexico, here, and reach Americans. And the wounds are not able, that is, he can only military facilities on the grounds there of Iraq or Jordan, for example, try to attack. But Iran's weakness has already been demonstrated, confrontation with Israel, because Iran was not able to apply significant damage to Israel in response to a whole series of elimination of excoriated leaders of the Hamas and Hezbollah movement. About Syria, what even happened there? So in Syria came to power, of course, terrorists. I am not going to change my position here, who committed genocide against Alawite Christians. We still hold our military bases, but they are essentially held hostage. The new Syrian regime. Therefore, our relatively neutral statements against Syria are conditioned by this. Our military bases. Our military are those who escape on our bases that are held hostage by the new Syrian regime. Turks had a hand in this. That is, without Turkish initiative would not achieve anything. Angelana. The Turks immediately concluded an agreement with England. Strategic partnership. And were going to use Syrian military facilities as their Turkish. That is, Syria would come under the control of Turkey, except for that territory controlled by the Kurds. And for the Kurds, of course, The Turks are the main enemy. As for the Turks, the main opponent is the Kurds, because Kurds are a threat to Turkey from point of view, dismembering Turkey into parts, because huge millions, just Kurds live in Turkey, they seek independence there. Kurds is one of the biggest peoples in the world who do not have their own state. There's almost 40 million people. They live in Turkey, Syria and Cancer and even Iran. So here, what did Israel do? He preemptively began to strike airpods, demolition of military facilities, all Syrian foe to prevent the strengthening of Turkey, because Erdogan his ambitions to the entire Middle East spreads to Central Asia. This is a threat to us. Pan-Turkism is a very serious problem for us, but Israel sees the problem is in the Middle Eastern vector, Erdogan policies. That is why he started such active actions. Israel, I will remind, also went to the south of Syria, occupied their military facilities, without again some sanctions of the UN Security Council, just wanted rightfully strong, and also advanced from Dutch heights. Still and again, central part of Syria a little, that is, increasing the zone of its occupation. Why create a buffer zone? Also, Israel leans on the Druze. This is some religious minority Syrian. Well, we could rely on Christians, Alevites in attack, but if we weren't busy so much Ukraine. So, in the Middle East we have another crisis, yes, that is besides Iran, that is Iran. This is how a part of the Middle East theme is, although if there is a US war of Iran, the whole Middle East is going to start shaking. But there is still a kind of parallel theme that is not removed. This is Syrian theme and Kurd question. And along with that there is also the traditional Israeli, and as if the crisis around Palestine, the one with the gas sector, the fact that the situation was not solved there, the war continues. Then you and I move on to the topic. Visit of our special envoy to Ukraine, but I call Kirill Dmitrieva that, because obviously his special envoy formally no one calls, but once he went the only one with a visit to Washington, and the Americans lifted sanctions from him. He can be called such a special messenger. How does Trump have a special messenger ducks? A Cyril Dmitriev who heads our Russian Direct Investment Fund, who was born in Kiev, studied in the USA, has extensive connections in the United States and the Middle East, goes to Washington, obviously with a purpose, how to change the attitude of Trump to that Putin is winning time and not going to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. Therefore such soft rhetoric. Here are many I know are unhappy with this soft rhetoric. I believe that the opposite competently he does everything we need. Appease like that well under oil, so now trap up to win really time. It's better we fool them later. But they longer be about it. Well, let's just guess. Getting to this, because Trump is already starting to convince that everything need to urgently aggressive steps against Russia to apply. Although I believe that he just no proper levers. Otherwise he would have already used them against Russia. So he posted a poll first, is it good? If Russia's relations with the United States will normalize for the whole world, all this he does on the platform Elon Musk. Again, it's all initiatives related to joint projects of Roscosmos and SpaceX companies Musk. They are also aimed at such a rapprochement. Let's not think about Ukraine. Let's think about Mars. About the Arctic, about rare earth minerals. But only you don't send new military aid packages in Ukraine, and let's get there, don't try to come up how to reduce the price of oil. And also he posted, still here is such a photo, well screenshot, as he flies to the Washington map and wrote about that anyway for their world security, for stability. Negotiations between the United States and Russia are necessary, and here is how important. What this happens in the background of getting ready. Ukraine is possible for new elections, which will not suit the green, that is green either will hold a lightning company, in order that no one has time to score a rating. Either heats against the election altogether. He is now here. Well in a situation that he will need to make some decision, either sign a deal with Trump bondage, a generation ahead on rare earth minerals, either hold elections and maybe he will lose then. And what happens? Such is the story. Interesting story around the commander-in-chief in Sioux at the former Meadowhead. The fact is that there was information from a person who led the Special Operations Forces of Ukraine. This is Sergei Kavonov's. He stated that in 2023 year Special Forces, that is, the security service of Ukraine stormed the general staff and tried to arrest personally Zelensky. What's interesting about this story? What the general staff? Natural location was a secret. NATO generals were there at the time. And that's the SPU special forces tried to take it by storm. Military special forces joined who put everyone down. Commandos from SPU face to the floor, laid out, came out and said, "You understand what you are even doing?" And after that the bank from the green passed back and said that some monstrous mistake happened and lets you in public. You will never talk about it. They laid this information, did not comment. But there is more. Once an open statement of the man who headed Special Operations Forces of Ukraine, that is he was Deputy Commander of Special Operations Forces of Ukraine. Here is Sergei Kavanovs. Why are suddenly talking about it now? Because you need to betray the hostage. Serious authority. He went literally to Britain. Britain took him under the wing. Green temporarily deprived the problem. With here's this competition around the pledge. And possibly this happened just the same against the background of this conflict. And in that moment we were really making out with you that the conflict between the pledged and Green, it's gaining momentum. Right now Green is worried that his main competitor is a hostage. And the party that drowns for the pledged begins to inflict beats on Green. These are the stories. I wouldn't be surprised if a story comes up soon. What's there laid alone there? I don't know. Stop the tank. Took out on myself. 10 horseradish from the pixie. I do not know saved their farm anything else. House a whole hut moved somewhere. As anyway that Green, what kind of meadows? All options are bad, that is, you cannot even choose from these options. Well, some lesser evil laid down absolute creature of Britain. Britain maximum. Anti-Russian minded power probably in the world. Well, only except that Poles more from these countries, who are traditional age-old Russophobes. Well, on this today's issue came up to its completion, and rather hope that you liked him.